Good evening and welcome to The World Today. My guest, who I'm going to be talking to about his work and his art, is an extremely unusual artist. He has been painting now for many years, and in his work one can see an evolution, both of his work, which has progressed, but also the work itself, its character and quality, even though it's very different from when he started, has not lost the contact with humanity, with everyday life, with the overall geopolitical situation in the area from which he comes. Walid Siti is an Iraqi Kurd who has worked in many different parts of the world. His most recent sculpture installation is on its way to Hong Kong soon. So I'm very glad to have him with us in the studio. Walid, great to have you with us. Before we proceed to your work, just give me a slight account of your life. You were born in Kurdistan, in Iraqi Kurdistan.
Thank you very much for inviting me. And yes, I'm born in Iraqi Kurdistan in 1954, where I graduated there from my primary school and intermediate school. In 1971, I joined the School of Fine Art in Baghdad.
Now, the School of Fine Art in Baghdad, other artists who've been through that school say that its quality was quite high. It was a very high quality fine art school in Baghdad.
Absolutely. It was a very energetic place, very competitive, and our teachers, they were all educated, mainly in Western Europe, brought the knowledge and expertise from there. And they were very kind and generous in giving us to pass to us their experience and their knowledge, and they created such a dynamic atmosphere of competitiveness and hardworking, and so the students were very much benefiting from that feedback, really.
A whole group of extremely gifted artists like yourself passed through that fine art school and became painters, sculptors. It was, quite a fertile period in Iraqi culture.
Absolutely, there was to do with some long history from the 40s when the British was colonizing Iraq. This kind of bourgeoisie in Baghdad was flourishing at that time, a part of elite. They all created a buzz of art and culture in Iraq at that time, the 40s, 50s, until 60s as well, and continued actually. So that was really like a foundation stone for Iraqi art scene, really, which, as you described correctly, that it flourished and advanced. There was a lot of support for art, I have to say, even with the regime which we didn't like, but there was still that really there, and it helped a lot. So there was a biannual and centenaries of art event, inviting artists from Arab world and from Europe to hold a very important exhibition, and that was very inspiring for us students who were studying in Baghdad at that time.
And then from the fine art school in Baghdad, you went abroad. You worked in Ljubljana, which is now the capital of Slovenia.
Right.
At that time, undivided Yugoslavia. Yeah. What was the reasons for moving to that particular school?
Sure. As I was describing before, that I was not part of the regime. So for me as a student graduating from that school in Baghdad, in order to further develop your art studies or go further, you have to be a member of the ruling party, Ba'ath Party, which I was not. Yugoslavia at that time had very strong tie with Iraq as non-aligned pact group. So they offer us entry without visa. So then I studied language and did my postgraduate there.
In Ljubljana?
Meanwhile, the political situation changed drastically in Baghdad and Iraq, yeah.
And then from Ljubljana you moved to London?
That's right, because as I was saying before, after 1 year arriving as a student in Ljubljana, the political situation in Iraq worsened drastically. So I went first year to visit my family, then I couldn't go anymore because I was against the regime at that time with a group of students. So I wasn't able to stay in Yugoslavia either because of tie with Iraq, didn't allow us to stay. So I came in 1984 to London as a political refugee to ask for asylum.
Because I think when I first met you and saw your work, you had again done a very striking painting, which we'll see in a minute, of very moving painting, which almost took you back to the times of the ancient Greek wars and the First World War. I mean, it was a painting about the Iran-Iraq war.
That's right.
With the widows sitting next to the bodies of their husbands. Did you carry on doing that sort of work for some time?
When I came to London and the Iraq-Iran war was in the peak of it, and you see through the media, TV, and other documentary, what's going on every day for such a long time, such a helpless and hopeless situation was very, very daunting, and I was much affected by that. And it peaked with the attack on the Kurdish town of Halabja by chemical weapon.
Of course.
So I was very affected by that. So I got immersed in that idea of somehow I tried to get it out of my system to come up with a series of etching and drawings on the idea of war.
And then came the Iraq War of 2003, which created more devastation and destruction in that country, but on a scale we had not imagined.
Sure.
You know. And I remember I was sitting with Sadi Youssef in London the day Baghdad fell, and we both started crying. And we felt it was a very deep blow. And then pictures began to come of the museums being looted, the treasures being thrown on the streets. Many antiquities from Iraq found their sort of way in the bags of Marines departing to the United States. How did you feel when you saw all this?
Sure. So unfortunately, everything went against what we were hoping as people who were wishing that the regime and Ba'ath Party be removed. But things
got worse.
Got worse, much worse, really, than we expected. Unfortunately, as you described, there was disaster in planning, disaster in execution in every way, and the human catastrophe and the tragedy of destruction of the Iraq and of its antiquities unfolded was absolutely unbearable to see.
Let's go and see some of your work now, and we'll carry on talking, because in all your work, including the work you're doing now, there is a strong sense of attachment to that region. Kurdistan, Iraq, the Kurdish people, their struggle, which comes out when suddenly you do a tower attached to a mountain. And I know what the mountains are. They're the mountains of Kurdistan, and the tower is a utopia. But let's go and talk about it. Let's start with the work you did in 1987, your war paintings, the war series.
Right.
And the war we are, of course, talking about is the Iran-Iraq war, often forgotten, but which went on for many years.
8 years.
8 years.
Yes.
And the casualties were the same as the First World War.
Absolutely.
Such a powerful etching of world at war, really. And you have the dead bodies and the women dressed in black, coming to mourn the dead and take them away. In some places they're taking them away, in some places they're sitting. But what I really love about this, it's universal. It could be Syria today, ancient Greece and Sparta yesterday, the First World War. It's incredibly strong and powerful.
That was my intention as well, that I want to give the nature of this conflict and the trauma, the devastation, this kind of universal, call it tone, that it relates to any other war before and many, unfortunately, war come after.
Which are happening now
absolutely,
as we speak.
Yeah, devastation. And so the trauma, the pain for mothers and sisters who will mourning and searching for dead, beloved one. That's what I tried to capture here in a kind of more kind of theatrical ways, like a platform where things happening there. There's the smoke of war, the devastation and remnants of some building and fire, and this woman in black searching for dead bodies. As a whole, I wanted to create this ambient of catastrophic and devastated landscape.
And so, how did you paint this? It's ink?
This is etching.
It's an etching. Right,
So
okay.
It's actually dry point etching. It was called directly. I etched on the plate with a needle. Then, of course, you apply paint, and then you put it under a pressure machine with wet paper to get the ink from that plate. Yeah. So this is an etching. It's all traditional way of printing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you did a number of paintings.
Painting, drawings, and etching, all in black and white, because I thought the black and white is much best. This kind of conflict and the trauma and the tragedy as a whole, really.
And color can sometimes glamorize it.
I feel so, and it's of course, I think when the war and devastation and the conflict and people, that the black and white is the only match, this contrasting, which is no shadow of gray there. Everything is in black and white. Everything is so conflicting and contrasting and against each other, playing all the way, element and human and ideas. Everything is some sort of clash in black and white. Yeah.
Well, that's very powerful.
Thank you.
If we move on to the next period, which is almost 10 years later, this painting, and then we go to the other one, what do they depict in your mind's eye?
Sure. It's still, as you were describing in the beginning, that my work always there's a traces of something previous period, that there's always this kind of like a thread which I could stitch everything together, all the series, all the evolved, how my work evolved. So here as well, I think the attachment to landscape, to place where I born and I brought up is still strong. Though it's a different manner, maybe it's more semi-abstract or expressionist manner, but it's still there. So some different element of the landscape, human, like in a boat, and a bit of mountains, and there's a lot of drama going on there. And the yellow and black somehow playing even more to create that sense of the call it drama, trauma as well at the same time,
So these are in a way some of, if you compare them to the Iran-Iraq war painting, these are then you're moving to abstraction.
Semi-abstraction.
Semi-abstraction. The transition.
This still element of landscape there because the ground is here and there's something evolving around here in the middle that I feel still there's a reference to landscape.
No,
but there's some, paring down of more realistic motifs, more towards some sort of abstraction.
It is moving in that direction.
Yes. But still, that attachment and relation and ties to history, to memory, to things. So this is like a period of work I did in the early 90s.
In 94.
Yeah, when I started the first time to visit my family after 16 years of absence. So it was kind of small diaries. I did then a smaller sketch, then I realized some of them on a bigger scale, like this one's here. So there was like impression of my visit back, the memories, and the story I was hearing from people, what they went through, and the tragedies, the migration, the exodus to the mountain, and coming back during an end of the first Iraq war, and Kuwait, when Iraq invaded Kuwait, so that time when the Kurds had to flee to the mountain and come back. So it's all to do with that memory, with that experiences.
This is very dramatic. It's this is water.
It's water, mountain, everything is mixed in. It's more symbolic of this kind of the mountain as a source of refuge for the Kurds. That where they ever was any suppression or attack on them, they will seek refuge in mountain. Where mountains, the place where of the source of water, vegetation, and as well to protect themselves against the attack. So this kind of an homage to this idea. So this sort of like animal there, an eye, and so like
that is very intriguing. What does the animal with the cyclopean eye?
It's like an animal which protect, sort of, it's kind of metaphoric.
Part of nature.
Yes,
Yeah. I mean, it is quite an astonishing painting.
Later, my work it's developed after a few, maybe 10, 15 years, my work slowly evolved, as you would describe earlier.
This is, in a way, though I can see elements of that, it's because that's you and what goes on in your head. But this is an amazing break as well.
Sure, thank you.
Different times, and it's I was looking at these on the web the other day and said these paintings, you call them New Babylon, which is, I like, but they could also be called utopias.
Yes, that's right. Because, I mean, the last, after the Iraq invasion, there was some idea or some hope, some dream that
it might improve.
I think it was a sort of a shift on thinking and dreaming of some new Iraq, which could be reconstructed on the destruction of what happened. So it's somehow deal with this idea, because I think there's still that process going on. There's sort of construction, deconstructions, and vice versa all the way. And so the picture here, it somehow reflects in fragility, uncertainty, that notion that things are happening, but you don't know whether it's going towards worse or better. There's both elements there. So something is erecting, being constructed, and sometimes other places we feel things are decaying and it's been destroyed. So they're both elements there, and I think that's the state of mind we all live in, apart from politicians who have a different vision, which is, I'm not going along that line. But for us, Iraqi people, we feel that that's how we live in a place which is uncertain, and we don't know what we face in tomorrow, really.
It's uncertainty.
Yes.
The whole region is now in a very desperate state, Walid, as you know better than me. But this is, of course, your sketch of a big installation.
Right.
So it's not just a change in form in your work, but you have now begun to do these huge installations. I mean, it looks stunning like this, but what it must look like in its actual life as a sculptor is, left to the imagination. I haven't been to one of these exhibitions.
I mean, when you transform a sketch to a different material, every material will impose their own rules on you.
Of course.
So, and to have a bay and appreciate that material. So the end result certainly will be different from this. But as well, sometimes I take it as it comes, really, and I deal with the process of making things. And there's a lot of transformation and changes, as I said, in respect to the material and what it can give me. Yes.
And what is that? Will be in
this the material acrylic on canvas.
Yeah.
And you could see as well, as you were saying before, even in my new work, there are always traces of archaeological or architectural iconic building of Mesopotamia and my culture, the ziggurat, the minaret of Samarra north of Baghdad, or sometimes it's related to pyramid or mountain as well, the place where I come from. So I see on all this form, the human, or encompass the human ambition to rise to glory or to be enlightened and to see the world from different perspective. Yeah. So I use always this kind of iconic element to express, to use as a vehicle to express these ideas. When
I first saw these, depictions. The first thought that came to me, before I had even seen some more pictures, Walid, was that this was, not this one in particular, but some others were a homage to the great constructivist, Vladimir Tatlin, and that the Tatlin Tower, which was never built except as model, and had they built that in Moscow in the 1918 or 19, it would have been a stunning monument, but they didn't. And that is the Tatlin Tower, almost.
One version of it, yes. Yeah. But at the same time, I am very, as well, much inspired by the minaret of Samarra, which might be. I don't know if there's any research
the
been
mix.
done. Yeah, if Tatlin himself was influenced by that, because that monument, that minaret, still exists today in Baghdad. Yeah. And it's high, very, very tall. I don't know, 100 something meters high, made from brick, and people can climb it actually. So there's a path you can go on. And for me, that somehow, I would say, for me, it comprised the idea of human endeavor to thrive, to try to achieve to the height. So you start from very wide circle, and slowly the circle gets smaller and smaller until you get the end. In the process, you learn a lot. You be enlightened. But at the same time, there's a limit how far you can go. So for me, there was this element always repeat in my work, from the time of war series and to the semi-constructive work, and even my installation and the work I do on 3Ds. There's a lot of repetition of this element, because I feel this somehow encompasses the core idea of humanity to achieve, to go to height and to be enlightened, as I said before. Yeah.
And just a layperson's question. I mean, how long does it take you to construct an installation?
Well, I mean,
in months?
Yeah, well, 1 month maybe. Of course, with the help of some technician, because I did a similar work like this, but that was a sketch for work in Istanbul. I did a year and a half ago. It was 7 meters high and made of wood. It took us just a week, actually.
Well, that's amazing.
Yes, yeah. But we had a crane and workers were helping us, yes, yeah.
Like Leonardo da Vinci used.
Thank you.
And this is, of course, an epic where you've mixed two different forms of your work, brought them together, and in a way it's a sort of beautiful statement that you are you, that you haven't changed, that the Kurdish mountains are there, these new structures of the new Babylon are there, and both are equally dominant. I mean, the mountains are more beautiful, of course, a work of nature, but they really, in terms of what is more dominant, you can't quite tell.
Mina is kind of combination, is what mood we're going through at the moment as a nation, that we are hoping, dreaming of some nationhood, of some entity. So the mountain is as pure white. Of course, a fictional mountain that don't represent any specific mountain, but it's symbolic. And underneath there's some construction, as you were saying, it's happening, evolving. Again, there's no any sign of certainty there, and what direction that could be taken. So the situation is floating and it's in a flux. So, but there's something emerging, and that's and these 3 pieces I say deliberately I made it in 3 pieces to give attention of idea of separation of. But the mountain is the element that it unites everything and brings things together somehow. Yes.
Well, it forces one to reflect that the Kurds are the only people in the Arab world who didn't get a nation after the First World War. For whatever reasons, we don't have to go into it. But now, given that they've worked in different environments, northern Iraq, there's still huge, horrendous persecution in Turkey.
That's right.
which Erdogan has increased. Then there are small pockets in Syria, which is probably in some ways the freest, and Iran as well. Do you think that the idea of a Kurdish state, one single Kurdish state, I mean, it would be great, but is it possible?
At the current time, I don't see it happening, no. I mean, you were saying that the Kurd, the only nation, have no, their country, and it's part of the legacy of what the colonialists, how they divided the area, and what's happening today is part of really a legacy of that time as well.
Exactly.
Because there was drawn lines among tribes, nation, sects, but
Different
never
religions.
taken any kind of advice from them or their consent to how to go forward, and they just draw the line, and now all this shift is happening in the area, so the border all the time been redrawn somehow.
And ethnic cleansing's taking place.
Absolutely, and ISIS is part of that. That's a kind of an attempt to bring things together again in a different format of their own ideology and so on. But altogether, I feel this is all somehow part of that legacy really left behind that we have to deal with today.
And Walid, when you go to parts of the world where people know very little about what's happening in the Middle East, like you're going to Hong Kong in a few weeks' time with your installation and your art, what is the reaction when you explain to people what's happening in the Middle East? They have a very vague idea.
Sure. I mean, you might. I think you might be aware. Last 20 years, all over West World, after what happened with Iraq invasion, there's some awareness and some interest in Middle East because what brought as well after September 11. So there's quite active. I would say interest, active, intrigue from the Western media as well, the Asian as well, about Middle East to understand because I think for a long time it's been neglected to have a more insight into that nation and their culture and their traditions. So after all this upheaval happened now, suddenly everybody alert to what happened and they're trying to
grapple with it.
With this.
And what are your own next plans? Do you think you're going to develop yet another form and move on to it? Right. Or will you carry on now where you've settled with the new Babylon, with the mixed images?
I mean, I don't have some images of the more recent work actually, which was a part of my exhibition in Berlin, which is called
I saw
Black Tower. There's some installation there, which I hope I will provide you later in the imagery. And that one, there was more kind of material used more like twigs, soldier toys, to express the idea of the situation we're going on through now at the moment in Middle East. But the toy soldier, they're all in one color, all white or black. Even my two installation in Sharjah biannual, just recently still going on. I used 6 flags with the toy soldiers hanging from this flag. Each flag was 3 by 1 meter. To express the idea of this kind of merging group of militias everywhere, and with the promise of salvation to poor people who are really desperate but lead to nowhere but to another devastation. So I'm using toy soldiers as one color, black or white too, as well, not to give an identity of any group as such, but all these people are victim of this kind of propaganda and wrong ideologies, and
You've not been to the Yemen?
No, unfortunately, no.
I mean, some of those buildings, I have been there, some of those ancient buildings, the first skyscrapers in human history, quite astonishing.
And shame that it's been
destroyed damaged by all these bombings.
And in a senseless war, really. It reminds me of Iraq-Iran war in a way.
Exactly.
I can't see real reason for that tragedy to continue.
With the Saudis doing what they're doing, backed by the West. It's horrendous. Walid, this has been a real pleasure that you've come and explained your paintings to us, and more power to you, and I hope you carry on, and I hope we will meet again soon.
Sure.
Not after 20 years.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.